YouTube. It's Full Spectrum Garage. Today we are going to do an oil change on the 997.2 GT3. This is actually my first time seeing this car's oil get changed, so this will be fun. So Ryan's going to take us through the process.
All right. Normally I would think that an oil change isn't worthy of a video, but since these cars are dry sump and it seems like new owners usually have some questions about it, so I figured it was worth the time to just kind of film this one. It's pretty straightforward. There were some gotchas that I was glad that the internet existed before I did my first oil change on this car. If we look underneath the car, we have the engine case in the middle, and this is the drain for the case right here. It has an aluminum crush washer behind it. Over here is the dry sump tank. This is, it's not as much of an integrated dry sump like the new Porsches have. This is like more of a traditional, like there's literally a tank here. When we drain the tank, there are two hexes. And so this one is the actual plug. And this one back here is a fitting on the tank. The bigger hex is the tank itself. This tank is made out of some really thin stuff to keep the weight down. And if you don't counterhold this back hex, what you can actually do is rip the bottom of the tank out. We don't have as many concerns on the case. It's a little bit more robust. And actually the torque value for this is actually pretty high. In fact, I think I don't usually torque it all the way. I just kind of let the crush washer crush a little bit and try to use some common sense. But we will go ahead and wheel a tank under here. And I'll show you guys how I get this off with the counter holding.
Sorry, camera crew error. Anyway.
Cut. So we'll get a tank under here, and we'll show you guys as we relieve this guy here. But we're not going to actually, we're not going to like use one arm and pry with the wrench. We're going to use two wrenches, and we're going to use our grip strength to squeeze together. So all the forces are going to be resolved between the two wrenches and squeezing them together. We're not, like I said again, we're not going to put a bunch of elbow grease into this thing. So let me grab a catch tank and we'll get rolling with getting the oil out here. Usually this stuff would be hot. This car is cold and it's been sitting. Again, on the tank side, we usually see the larger quantity of oil. I think we're like 9 quarts total. So we would expect to see a bigger portion come out of here and a smaller portion come out of the center of the engine. What can happen with dry sump 911s is that level can equilibriumize a little bit over time, and we can see some more come out of the engine. So we won't be surprised if we see big quantities out of either one, and we'll try not to make a huge mess in the shop. That said, you might be doing this warm. Since this car's cold, we're probably going to drain it and let it sit overnight since we don't have anything to do with it tonight and it's kind of late. So that's the reason why I'm not exactly sure which plug is going to have more oil in it. But if, like I said, if this was warm and you'd just been driving it, you would expect this guy over here to be your big quantity. Okay, let me get a tank and we'll get going.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we're doing the crankcase drain here. There's nothing to counterhold on this. It's straight into the engine cases. Just gonna pop it loose. Hopefully some other satisfying sounds here. Let's thread this bad boy out. Still potential for mess because quantities aren't near zero. Poop. Okay, so we're back at the top of the vehicle. We've lowered our lift down. We're going to attack the oil filter here. We've got is it Schwaben or Schwaben, a nice German tool. There's a part number hiding right there. This is just what Pelican Parts sells for this car. This is a situation where, like, You can use all kinds of tools for this, but just having the right one is the right thing to do. So I have laid several layers of paper towels under this filter assembly on top of the alternator, which we can't see anymore, and kind of tucked back up in here, and then one on the air box. What seems to happen is, even though right now as we're standing here, the oil drain plugs are out of the engine and the crankcase, or sorry, the crankcase and the oil tank, but there's going to be so much oil up here potentially that it just makes an unimaginable catastrophe of oil. Yeah,
I just did not expect this.
That happened to me once, and so this is a learned behavior. So this will be the time, like this car's been sitting for maybe a week, so maybe in this case it's all drained out, but I just like to have my little bib on there so that I can keep myself out of as much trouble as possible.
And plus with the new air box.
Womp. Okay. Yeah, this is one of those times when just having the right tool is just the right thing to do. Makes life easy.
Well, I already see there's some oil like seeping out now that you've loosened it.
Right, which this is should be empty, but
it's not.
Okay. It's not too bad. This isn't my worst instance of this. So I've seen some other respected folks use like a turkey baster at this point. I'm probably not going to. I'm probably going to use some nice clean towel and like dab some of that out and make a huge mess. But yeah, so this is our filter. It's this is a Molly filter. It's got I think on the other end, it's got the stock 996 part number. This is just from the dealership. I've got parts over here on the table that are from the dealership also. Silly not to use anything but OEM Porsche on this stuff. So we'll walk this over to the table and we'll take a look at the old and new parts for the rest of restoring this can here and replacing the filter. Okay, back to the workbench over here. We've got our plastic oil filter housing and the drain plugs that we removed. We have our oil filter sitting here, peacefully draining out. We've got our new oil filter and our baggies with new crush rings and O-rings. We'll try to blast these part numbers up onto the screen so you guys know what we got. This is what Pelican gave me, so hopefully we'll find out in a few minutes that these are the right deal. This large O-ring, this comes with the OEM oil filter. It's going to be in this location on the plastic canister. This O-ring is actually up here, and I don't know if we can see on the camera, but this thing's got some pretty good little chunks taken out of it. I actually didn't have this part the last time I did an oil change. This has sort of been a learning process for me of what was different on the GT cars from like the older 911s. And this O-ring was something that I missed. I didn't actually know that I needed. And it's been giving me some heartburn because my little brain has known that it's been sitting in there. So this will be the first time of us prying this stuff off. I'm going to try to go after it with this 90-degree pick. Pick is not always the right tool for the job, but basically any tool, if you're careful, can be used for this kind of thing. We don't want to go digging around in there and wreck our plastic. So we're just going to be careful and try to pick these guys out. So we'll see what we come up with here. Dope. That comes off.
Today I learned.
Yeah. Anyway.
That's good.
No.
Trying some different strategies here.
We wouldn't. Okay.
Nice.
So this thing's nice and hard. You can tell it's definitely been in there for a while. So we've got our nice new one here. I'm going to set the old one aside and go ahead and dig this guy off of here. And discard. One other thing that I like to do when I have these parts, and I have started in a new psychosis. I've started saving the oil filters as part of my documentation for the cars that I keep, mostly on the 2 cars that I have that are still under warranty. So this GT car is obviously too old for that, but as part of my records, I've been keeping these oil filters. And what I will do is you can just kind of pull these pleats aside and take a look for what debris might be catching in here. It gives you a nice opportunity to check the health of your engine. We're going to look for really anything. Metal is obviously really bad, but plastic is bad too. There are plastic parts inside the engine, various timing chain guides and things like that. So you really don't want to see anything. The newer the engine, you might see some little pieces of metal. But like I said, we're just going to take a quick look, and like what we're seeing here is basically nothing, just some oil hiding in there, so that's good. That's what we'd hope to see. And again, in my psychosis of keeping these, I will have a batch of these things where I can say, hey, we've had this car for 6 years and 20,000 miles, and these are the oil filters that we pulled out of it. I'm not suggesting that you follow in my psychosis, but that's my thought process. So anyway, good to take a look at these things before you just chuck them, but do chuck them. Okay, we're going to slip these O-rings back on, and I've got oily gloves, but I'm going to pick up this oil filter and just get just a little bit of oil onto the tip of my glove, and I'm going to go ahead and lube these O-rings up a little bit. A general rule of thumb is if you have an O-ring and you're going to lube it with something, you can lube it with the thing that it seals against. So in this case, we wouldn't necessarily pick up gasoline and do this because we don't know that these seals are rated for gasoline, but we know that they're rated for engine oil. So I'm just going to get a nice little coating of oil on them and go ahead and slide them on here. I try not to roll these things too much, but it seems like it happens anyway. And then you just want to make sure that they are looking good when they get seated down at the bottom. I haven't really figured out a good way to avoid. There's probably some $300 seal installer that just slips these things on as a cone, but I've never had any trouble doing this. So get this thing seated here. And this is my first time doing the little one, so he's gonna pop right on. So this guy should be good. Grab our new oil filter. Thanks, Pelican. We won't be using that.
Sponsored by, not at all.
Yeah, not at all.
Sponsored by us spending our own money.
Yeah. So we go ahead and slam this guy in here. I think that's how we're going to do it. We'll start with it on this canister, I think. I don't think it needs to be in the engine first, but if that's wrong, we will fix it. We did decide we're going to do this the other way. We're going to slip this filter into the housing over the large boss at the bottom, and he's just going to slip down like that. Nice little click.
That works much better than the other way.
Much nicer. So we've got our new O-ring here and our new O-ring here. We're going to go ahead and slap this guy together. And I'm going to grab the torque is right on it, 25 Newton meters. I'm going to do the calculation to inch pounds and grab my small torque wrench and torque this guy on. The plug has a taper in this area, so that'll drive that. It drives that seal into the right place if it drips a little bit. so I did do about 50 foot-pounds, and that's about what I had done it by feel.
Interesting.
Yeah.
We were having this discussion off camera, but it was telling Ryan that 50 foot-pounds was the right torque, and he was like, I don't know. It seems like too much. But
Yeah, that's a fastener that I've usually done by feel because it's the same as the old air-cooled cars, and if you just, like, you need the aluminum washer to deform a little bit, but you don't want the thing coming, tearing the threads out of the block. So
now you know it feels good.
yeah, it feels pretty good. We'll go ahead and put up we'll do a little bit of research and put what we've found as the torque values. On the tank, I did the tank by feel with squeezing the wrenches. That's what I'm comfortable with because I don't want to tear that fitting out of there, and I'm confident that it's tight. That's the way I've always done this car. We'll go ahead and give you the torque values for that, and if you feel confident counter holding it and getting your torque wrench in there, and if you're not super experienced with this kind of stuff, and it's not your millionth random fastener, maybe you do want to go ahead and use your torque wrench and counter hold the thing. So we'll give you all that information, and by all means, don't do it the way we do it. Do it the way that you feel most comfortable, within the guidelines of what the book says. So we're going to go ahead and throw some oil in this thing. We're using the AMSOIL. Go ahead and like this place is. We got my tornado of rags that were protecting the engine earlier. So we are going to throw some AMSOIL European. This FS, this is the full SAPS version of this oil. That means it can be a little bit harder on your emissions equipment. Catalytic converters can maybe get more plugged up. That's not something that I necessarily care about. I'm looking for the best lubrication that I can get. This does meet the Porsche A40. I kind of wondered if the Signature Series might be better, but when I called those guys, they weren't willing to tell me anything on the phone other than if it has the spec for your car, you should follow the spec. So I'm like, okay, this is fine. I think the car is 0-40 in the owner's manual and probably like a Mobil 1, but we've been doing this for years and years, so we're happy with it. I always laugh when people are like, well, this oil works for me, but like it's not a great scientific test because like obviously we haven't run this engine to its conclusion, so we can't say like this motor has 30,000 miles on it. It hasn't blown up like award for not sucking, but this is what we use. It's not a commercial for it. We'll go ahead and throw it in there and get it started up and go from there.
Sounds good.